Hi everyone, my name is Zoé Labonté, and today I'll be presenting my honors thesis on predicting depression by measuring valence in our spontaneous thoughts. So it has been shown in previous literature that depression has a negative impact in our spontaneous thoughts, and this is due to its cognitive aspect. So some of the cognitive symptoms of depression may be a prevalence in negative mood, rumination, a focus on past experiences, and a higher number of self-centered thoughts. And these are typically measured with self-reports. So here's an example of the depression, anxiety, and stress scale. So the DAS-21, which usually ask, have they felt aware of dryness in their mouth? Was it hard to wind down? And the participant has to look at how many times a week have they felt that. So there's a few limitations of using self-reports to look at the cognitive symptoms of depression. Some of them are a high focus on somatic symptoms, a need for recalling and introspection, because usually participants have to be self-aware enough to know that they're feeling that way, but they also have to recall how many times a week have they felt that way. And it has been shown that these two skills are usually impaired by depression. So there is a real need to find an objective measure to complement the work of self-report. And this objective measure could be free association. So it is typically a sequence of thoughts generated spontaneously to reflect unconscious associations. So, for example, a participant is asked to say the first thing that comes to their mind for 5 minutes, and we will look at their unconscious associations through their thoughts. So it has no filter, there's no need for recollection, and it is reliable. And free association is still being used today, usually in addiction, stress, or anxiety studies. And for example, in addiction, participants may be asked to, for 5 minutes, for example, to say the first thing that comes to their mind after hearing a triggering word, for example, drinking or getting high. And the researcher will look at what the participant is saying, which is usually without no filter, and the researcher will see if the participant is in the recovery phase or if they are relapsing. So could free association be used in depression? Here are my two hypotheses. The first one is that the higher the person is on the DAS-21 depression subscale, the higher their proportion of negative words in their free association chains. And the second one is that the higher the person is on the DAS-21 depression subscale, the higher their proportion of negative to negative transitions. So to do so, I'm doing a post hoc correlational study. I'm using data by a study from Bellana et al. From 2022. I have two samples. The first one is of 80 participants from the study by Bellana, and the second one is of 160 participants. And to look at all these hypotheses, here's an example. So you can see an example of free association chain going from exposed to divorce, and I'll be looking at valence ratings. So valence is the sentiment of a word, whether a word is considered to have a positive, neutral, or a negative sentiment. And to do so, I'll use ChatGPT because it has been proven to be a really good and reliable measure of valence. For example, ChatGPT said that the word expose has a negative valence, but the word husband is neutral and the word happy is positive. So to look at the proportion of negative words, I'll count all the negative words and look at its proportion in one free association chain. And the second measure is the proportion of negative to negative transitions. To do so, I'll calculate the total number of the transitions and look at the number of negative to negative transitions. For example, going from expose, which is a negative word, to lie, which is also a negative word, counts as a negative to negative transition. However, going from hate, which is negative, to husband, which is neutral, counts as negative to neutral transition, which I will not be looking at. And the third measure is the DAS-21. So I'll be using its scores to look at the correlation between all the valence measures and the depression scores. So here are my results. So for hypothesis 1, which looks at the negative proportions of words, It was only in sample one, which is the smallest one, that I found a significant but weak positive correlation. And it was not replicated in the largest sample, which had no significant correlation. Same thing happened for hypothesis two, which look at the negative to negative transitions. It was only in sample one that I found a significant positive correlation, but it was not replicated in sample two, which had no significant correlation. So what could it mean? I think that these findings show initial support for both hypothesis in simple one, but it was not replicated in simple two, which suggests a lack of generalization. And some of the reasons why we found this may be, for example, the nature of depression, which can be looked at a state or a trait. But I think that our findings suggest that depression may not be a constant trait, but rather a fluid state, because free association captures depression at a specific moment. For example, if you look at a participant on a Tuesday morning at 8 a.m., they might not show depression in their spontaneous thoughts. But what if you look at them on a Wednesday at 3 p.m., for example? They might show depression in their spontaneous thoughts, which means that these negative thoughts may not persist continuously, which emphasizes the transient nature of depression. And the second limitation is free association, because, like I said previously, it captures our thoughts at a specific moment, which may limit our understanding of the overall mood of the participant. And there's also one thing that could impact free association, which is strategies being used during the task. For example, participants with depression may choose to describe their environments rather than really delve into their negative thoughts, which may be very dark. So they might try to protect themselves from, all these negative mindsets, which has an impact in our results. And I think that the type of association I'm using, which only look at words rather than sequences or really train of thoughts, may be overlooking deeper emotional and cognitive dimensions of depression. So, in terms of our conclusion and future directions, I think it is important to embrace the value of free association despite its limitation. And I think it would be interesting to look at the other method of free association, which looks at sequences. And it will also be interesting to use a longitudinal study to look at the temporal dynamics of depression. It will also be interesting to look at the strategies being used in free association and their underlying meanings. It will also be interesting to look at complementary symptoms. Like I said previously, it has been shown that people with depression tend to focus more on past experiences and they have higher numbers of self-centered thoughts, which might be interesting to look at in a free association chain. And I think that my result foster a nuanced understanding of depression as a cognitive disorder. So this is it for me, and thank you for listening.